Hello there, hi there. This is American Flyer history. Before we dive into a little bit of a maintenance refresh here on these two GP7s, that stands for General Purpose Switchers or Road Switchers. These were made by American Flyer in this attractive Union Pacific color scheme between 1955 and 1957. The number on them, as you can see, is 372. The only difference between these two engines appears right here. This one says made by American Flyer. This one says made by Gilbert. Other than that, these are identical. They both come with a single motor powering 4 drive wheels, including traction tires. So I'm going to go ahead and go through these and get them serviced so we can run them on the layout. And of note, this one is a little bit harder to find than this one. So here we are again with our GP7. This is the built by Gilbert unit that I'm taking apart to do a little bit of lubrication, cleanup on it. And a couple things that I thought would be worth noting. This engine doesn't run. The reason is this wire came off of here. So the field is not being magnetized, which means the armature is not going to spin. So that's worth noting. The other thing that I found very surprising is the color of the wire used on the field. I have never seen this before. This has definitely been rewound. So it'll be curious to see how this thing performs once I get the wiring hooked back up and everything lubricated. Hopefully it'll work all right. Makes me nervous seeing this. On the diesels made by American Flyer, they have these motors that, as you can see, have a commutator on one end, and then they have worm gears on either end, which is how you get a four-wheel drive. And these motors thrust back and forth depending on which direction they're going. So at the end of each one of these shafts is a little wear plate or thrust plate that should be right here. And as you can see, this motor is missing one, so I'm going to have to replace that. But if it's missing and the motor goes this way, you can see how that worm gear is thrust into the back of the chassis, which is going to cause a bunch of wear, cause the motor to overheat, and cause all sorts of issues. So this is why we do maintenance on these old things, to make sure they're in great shape and can last a lot longer yet. Here we are for our next update on this GP7 number 372. I've got the motor put back together after lubricating it. I've done some cleaning with the reverse unit here, and I've got a jumper wired to this rail here and up to on top of the motor here to get us both sides of the circuit. You can see the engine runs well in both directions. The reverse unit cycles nicely. A little bit faster forward than it is in reverse. Ready to have the shell put back on and hit the rails. So welcome back for our next to the final installation or installment of our 372 refresh. I've got everything cleaned and back together, and thought I would just point out the one culprit that was preventing this particular engine from running very well, and that is this screw right here was actually not all the way in. This screw is a part of a strap, and there's an inner strap below that, but those two straps together work in tandem to hold the field in correct alignment. And the field, as I've mentioned before, gets energized and then becomes magnetic. So if that field is not held in the right place, the armature, which is spinning inside of it, will actually rub up against it or be kept from moving, which obviously can cause things to overheat and armatures to burn out, you name it. So that's a really crucial piece, is to have those screws fastened correctly. And when they are, you get an engine that runs very well in both directions. Next video, engines will be on the layout running. Okay, so I'm reading the ohms, okay, and we're at 0.5, 0.6, and this is on the field for the second 372 that you haven't been seeing running because it was getting super hot. Now I'm going to switch to the new field that I just got. Okay, now look at the resistance, or I should say the ohms. This is a replacement field that I picked up. So you can see it's significantly higher. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, good question. When the ohms in this particular case is higher, we've got a better magnetic field. When it's lower, we have a weaker magnetic field. If it's weaker and we're trying to spin an armature in a field that's weak, it's going to lead to overheating, it's going to lead to overamping, it's going to lead to a short life of the motor. So when I was running this engine around the layout after here on the workbench, it worked perfectly because I'm not testing for ohms or anything like that. If it runs, I put it on the layout and I noticed it took more voltage to get it going. But then it ran and it ran. I had it running for probably 10 or 15 minutes. And then I thought, okay, let's put the second 372 on and we'll make a longer train. Well, as soon as I put a second motor on the track, or a second engine, because this one was taking such a large amount of current, the first engine just would take off, and this one would kind of stop because there was so much voltage being applied to the rails. In other words, a normal engine would have been running super fast. So the healthy engine took off and was spinning like crazy, and the unhealthy one, this one, didn't do anything except get hotter and hotter and hotter. And so very quickly I realized what was going on. So I took the first one back off that was running well and put this one on. Well, at that point, this one was so hot it just started to smoke, and I couldn't get it to run. So I brought it back over here, started testing, and I have a book that tells me what the specs are, because there's lots of windings, these little red things or orange things, these wires are called windings. And again, when you wrap a wire, a copper wire, around steel or iron, and you run a current through it, it creates a magnetic field. And so all of these wires are creating magnetic fields. We have field there, we have fields in here, 3 of them. And so I have books that tell me how to check to make sure nothing's shorting out. And this one, while I can't conducively say I found the short, based on the ohm reading, we can say there's something definitely not right. And when you have a field like this and there's a short, you can see all this wire is covered with this coating. It's called enamel. If that enamel for some reason wears away, or it gets too hot and it becomes thin or ceases to be there, burns away, now you have 2 wires that are connected, so you've all of a sudden lost some of your wrap. And if that happens enough times, you basically have a short. Even though you still got some functionality, it's not enough. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but anyhow, that's what's going on there. So the good news is this can be rewrapped. I don't really have a way to do that other than manually do it, so I chose to purchase a rewrapped one that from another gentleman. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this together. And my testing said that the armature was in good shape. It checked out good. But I thought, you know what, just in case, I'm going to go ahead and get a second one, because there was one point while I was checking this that I did get a bad reading. I couldn't reproduce it. But I thought, well, maybe we've got a wire on this end that is a little bit compromised. So anyhow, that's the latest and the greatest on the second 372. Alright, so a few minutes later, I've got some of the engine reassembled, and I've done it in this way because I want to actually be able to adjust the new field that I put on, and that adjustment is done by this little screw, and there's another one on the back side. Basically what you're doing is you're adjusting how the field sets relative to the armature. Now, I didn't really do any adjustments, and this engine seems to be, or I should say motor, seems to be running really well as it is. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll have to use two hands, so I'll take the camera off, but I'm gonna do a little bit more adjustments here just to see if there's a sweet spot, if you will. But kind of out of the gate, this thing is running very, very well, as you can hear and see.